Well, good afternoon. Whoa, good afternoon. And welcome back to our viewers on the internet. Welcome back to the Atlanta Summit on Global Health and Hunger with our focus on food and nutrition security. Please, as we continue the program, it is a working summit, as it were. Please continue your lunch. They will continue to serve and take care of you during this. We knew that we would have these time constraints, but we're very grateful for people to stay here. I did want to say that after our keynote presentation, and then we have what will be a very robust discussion with the corporations who are deeply engaged in this subject around the world in some very sophisticated ways in looking at both their challenges and their as well as the successes. But we'd like to say, you see in the program, it's a very intentional thing. Some of our panelists and many of us are holding open the opportunity for your own networking and interaction afterwards. We have this ballroom. We intentionally did that. We have it until 5 o'clock. You can stay until then, so that once Dr. Gale does her last remarks and closes out the conference, I wanted to invite you to stay, chat as long as you want. That's the purpose of this, is for all of us to get to know each other or get to know each other better. So thank you for that. I did want to say one final word, first and final, about the World Affairs Council of Atlanta, just to say that we are really proud to be part of this. We are almost 3 years old. In July, we will be 3 years old as an organization. We are a nonprofit membership organization that relies on people like you to join us, or your institutions to join with us, so that we can continue to do programs like this. Certainly, to repeat, we ought to repeat a lot, to note our corporate sponsors and know that we also cannot be here without their gracious support for this meal and this area, this wonderful facility. People ask us, well, why do you have it in a nice hotel and all the rest? It's to honor you, honor the practitioners who are doing this work, and we wanted to make sure, and the corporations and the university that is backing this, they wanted to make sure that we honor you as practitioners and people involved in the field in this, we hope, very special way. The only program note we have is, you'll see on your chairs, we do have a really important program coming up, strange month for us in June, but the ambassador of the European Union to the United States will be here, along with the ambassador to the United States from Ireland, talking about growth, and that Europe also is involved in the questions about development and growth as we are in the United States. Well, it's a very distinct pleasure and honor for me to introduce our luncheon keynote speaker. Once I finish the introduction, then we'll key up a short video that we have on the company Cargill and what they're doing around the world. But our luncheon keynote speaker, Michael Robach, he's Vice President for Corporate Food Safety and Regulatory Affairs at Cargill. When we began planning for this summit, we knew that we needed to have in this keynote position someone who could speak from the perspective of one of the largest companies in the world, and certainly the largest agribusiness company in the world, who could bring leadership experience in agribusiness with expertise in food security and food safety. And Michael Robach certainly is that person. And we wanted to invite someone whose company has significant investment in Georgia as well, and a relationship to our huge agribusiness and food sectors that are actually the leading business sectors in the state of Georgia. Mike has worked in the industry in agribusiness and worked closely with USDA, FDA, global governments regarding food safety policy, regulatory reform, and he bases his work on science, the evidence and science-based decision-making that we've heard a lot about today. Mike started his career with Monsanto, and prior to joining Cargill, he headed up technical services for Wayne Farms in the poultry industry here in Georgia, which makes all of us in that business who were in that business smile. Dave Forquer and others who are associated with the poultry business are here today, and it's a great pleasure that we could welcome Mike home to his work in the poultry industry and with the National Association related to poultry industry and egg issues, not only in this country but around the world. So welcome home. In his current position, Mike has led Cargill's corporate efforts across food protections, food security, quality assurance, animal health, and regulatory compliance. And more we're seeing in these conversations even today how these titles, these subject areas interconnect and link together. And that's the kind of work we're trying to do, is to understand how these interconnections work and work effectively, or more effectively, as we move forward. Mike continues to refocus the department that he leads toward the company's global efforts, in line with Cargill's vision of being the global leader in nourishing people. Mike has served as president of the Supply of Affordable Food Everywhere, SAFE, a group of global food companies, NGOs, intergovernmental agencies, and universities, all working together to assure food safety and security in the supply chain itself that brings us food around the globe. After Mike's presentation, which will be after a short video on Cargill, we'll also have some time for Q&A, and Mike welcomes your questions at that time. So we will introduce the video, and then after that we'll have Mike come up and give our keynote address. Thank you.
I did not produce that, but thank you. That's our commercial for the day. So I hope it was informative. Tells you a little bit about who we are and where we've come from. And you know, I'm really honored and pleased to be here today to be able to talk about a vision for global food and nutritional security. And I think, as we've heard this morning, it's one of the world's most pressing issues. But before I begin, I'd like to thank Wayne again and the World Affairs Council of Atlanta, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and Stephen, and CARE for organizing this very important summit on global health and hunger. And before I start also, I'd like to recognize a couple of people. One is Helene Gale, who leads CARE, an extraordinary partner of ours for more than 20 years. And it's really amazing. We're working together in 9 countries to improve food security, education, and agricultural development in rural communities. It's just been a fantastic partnership, and we're looking forward to many more years. I'd also like to recognize Tom Frieden and CDC and Charlie Stokes and the CDC Foundation staff. We work with them on a number of projects related to food safety and food security, one of which includes the Flour Fortification Initiative, which we heard about earlier today. And that's been a program that's really improved nutrition for hundreds of thousands of people in developing countries. I'd also like to recognize Jada McKenna at USAID, who has been a terrific partner for Cargill for our work, where we're working together to strengthen agriculture and food security, particularly in Africa. And then also, we had Senator Johnny Isakson here this morning, and Senator Isakson's been a great partner of business around the importance of free trade and how free trade can drive food security. So a food secure world is one where all people have access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food that provides the foundation for active and healthy lives. It also, as Senator Isakson pointed out, affects more than human health and welfare. It also contributes to economic and political stability. The UN estimates that almost 1 billion people, just under 15% of the world's population, is undernourished today. The majority live in developing countries, most in China and India, and the highest prevalence of undernourishment is in sub-Saharan Africa. Africa's population represents about 1/7 of the world's population, but it hosts over 1/4 of the world's undernourished people. So the central question about food security is, can we feed the world? And at Cargill, we believe the answer is yes. Despite the many challenges, we at Cargill firmly believe that we can feed a world on its way to 9 billion people. Food security is primarily a political and an economic issue. The world produces enough calories today. We just don't have them ending up where they're most needed. In fact, we live in a time where the world is furthest that it's ever been from a caloric famine. We're producing calories at an all-time high, but the bounty is not evenly distributed or evenly available. So let me take just a minute to discuss some facts about food production and consumption, and then I'll talk about 3 things that we can do to create a more food-secure world. First of all, from a demand standpoint, as incomes grow, diets diversify. People eat less grain and eat more meat, vegetable oil, and sugars. 2/3 of the world's population have incomes below $2,000 a year. That's almost 4.5 billion people. And primarily, those people rely on grains for their diet. But for any part of the world, regardless of where it is, once you cross about $5,000 in income per capita, the crop production system becomes more meat destined than grain destined. For an example, China's meat consumption has grown 6-fold in the past 30 years as a result of higher disposable incomes. And make no mistake about it, meat and protein are nutritionally powerful. Consumed reasonably, it's loaded with nutritious protein and delivers a broad spectrum of micronutrients, one of the problems we talked about this morning. Another interesting fact about the world food system is it's dominated by the Northern Hemisphere. Approximately 87% of the world food production and consumption is in the Northern Hemisphere. And for many years, that consumption was growing very steadily at about 30 metric tons a year. But since 2002 or 2003, with the advent of biofuels, we've almost doubled the consumption growth rate to 50 to 60 million metric tons a year in increased demand. Now, we've had high prices, and that's been able to keep farmers incentivized to continue to produce more. So we have both production and consumption trends right now well above their historical lines. So over a long period of history, the main contributor to increased food production has been yield gain, and that yield gain has been really found through genetic improvement and fertilizer intensification. Acreage planted has been relatively stable from 1975 to the early 2000s, but only recently, with the advent of biofuels, have we seen an increase in acreage. So farmers have met the challenge of meeting this increased demand for food at an acceptable environmental price. And for the most part, that means not taking high conservation value land into production. Most people in the West think of food security in only one way, and that's in terms of rising prices. And rising prices then creates an angst which can interfere with reality. Food security is not complicated, but it is unforgiving. It involves interdependent parts, and having all those parts working together is what makes it complicated. So what do these parts include? We've already talked about the increased global consumption fueled by a rising population, the increased impact of biofuels, declining investment in agricultural research and development, changing consumption trends as we see middle-class communities emerging around the world, supply shocks, production shortfalls, and government policies that limit trade and productivity. Now, I want to highlight three things that, if we take the right steps on each, can create a more food-secure world. The first is to engage in trust-based free trade. So, if we have any economists out there, you're probably familiar with the name on this next slide. Oh, guess we don't have that slide, okay? Well, there was a British economist by the name of David Ricardo, who was born in 1772 in London, England. And he came up with a law of comparative advantage. And simply put, comparative advantage is that the world will always raise the most food, the most economically, with a better environmental footprint if every farmer plants the right crop for his or her soil and climate and then trades freely with others. It's a very simple, fundamental economic principle. We have the opportunity at Cargill to speak with governments whose response often to rising prices and food security is to pursue self-sufficiency. If every country on earth tried to pursue self-sufficiency in food, there would be less food in the world today because we're not all equally endowed with climate or by soils to be self-sufficient. As a result, the role of trust-based free trade becomes increasingly important if we're going to follow and utilize Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage. Because global food supplies fluctuate much less from year to year than local harvests, trade makes consumers less vulnerable to local shortages and higher prices caused by bad weather, crop disease, or civil disorder. Trade also plays a crucial role in ensuring food security by allowing agricultural commodities to move from places of surplus to places of deficit. And this becomes even more critical as populations continue to grow. Trade, combined with increased investment in agricultural development, contributes to enhanced economic growth, reduces poverty, and creates a more nutritious, a more nourished world. In these ways, trade helps feed a hungry world. And you can see some of this happening today with what is happening with corn production. Brazil, traditionally a major producer of soy, has stepped up its corn production, now often growing a second crop on the back of early soy harvests. This put Brazil in a position last year to step in and help meet demand in the United States, where corn yields were down due to the severe drought. So we are trying to show how important trade is in feeding the world. The world will raise the most food, the most economically, and in the most environmentally responsible way when farmers plant the right crops for their local climate and soils using the right technology, and then have access to free markets to trade. By encouraging free trade and a fair, rules-based, rigorously enforced system, governments can help ensure that food supplies are able to reach areas of deficit. Cargill advocates for policies that support agricultural development through this trust-based open trade. We believe that this infographic helps provide insights and some interesting data about the importance of moving food and the benefits that ensue when food flows freely from nation to nation. This next part of the chart shows the specialization of different geographies in the world based on comparative advantage and how imports or exports have changed since 1965. You have a copy of this at your tables as well. On the left are those geographies blessed with natural resources from an agricultural standpoint compared to their populations. The big changes that we've seen in food production during that time came mainly in South America, primarily from Brazil and Argentina, and in the former Soviet Union, primarily Russia and Ukraine. On the right is the opposite. Asia, Middle East, and Africa will continue to require increased imports to satisfy growing populations. Because the global food supply has much less price variation year over year than local markets, free trade has a stabilization effect on food prices. On the other hand, by closing borders and attempting to endure weather disruptions and price volatility alone, nations end up forcing higher food prices on all of their citizens. Commercial smallholder farmers often are forced to sell at harvest when they are cash flow destitute and have limited access to real credit. Selling at depressed prices creates a cycle of discouraging further production in ensuing years. Free trade and open markets provide farmers with greater access to reliable global markets into which they can sell their crops each season. When rewarded with adequate price, this provides an incentive to continue production the following year and the ability to continue to raise their incomes. But we need a global food system that embraces open markets and promotes free trade for this to happen. The second thing we need to get right in order to increase food security is balancing food and fuel. The use of agricultural feedstocks, including corn, soy, and sugarcane, as inputs for the production of biofuels is projected to grow, largely driven not by the market, but by biofuel mandates and support policies. By 2020, biofuels will consume 13% of the global coarse grain production. That's up from 10% today, and 15% of all vegetable oil production. It's up from 11% today. The biofuels industry has moved from an insignificant consumer of grain to a significant one over a period of just 10 years, and it has dramatically disrupted the food system over that period. Clearly, we have diverted more of our crops to the production of biofuels. Well, there's not a single cause of food insecurity, and that includes the biofuels explanation. But farming is an outdoor activity, as we have seen last year in the Midwest with the impact of the severe drought on the corn crop. Last year, if you will remember, from January through the first week of June, the price of the most important food crops fell 20% in anticipation of bountiful harvests. Then the rain stopped. Complacency in the face of assumed abundance turned into crisis in anticipation of these shortages. By August, corn and soybean prices had reached their highest levels, 6 years for corn, 9 years for soybeans. And the U.S. corn crop showed the biggest deviation from expectations in history, losing an unprecedented 4 billion bushels of corn production in 2012 from the first projection of the crop in May. So the drought is a reminder to all of us that we can't take food production for granted. We need to rely on our global food system and free trade. In times of market stress and supply disruptions, we need to move to more market-driven biofuel policies rather than accepting inflexible mandates. We produce enough calories to feed the world. We just have to make the right choices on how to effectively distribute those calories. So the third major item to get right is one of the most challenging, and that's realizing the potential of Africa. This is an interesting slide because it shows how really large the continent is. According to the McKinsey Global Institute, Africa represents about 60% of the potentially available cropland in the world. It is well suited to the fruits of photosynthesis, lots of sun, adequate water, and good soils. So Africa is critical to feeding the planet's growing population. But the reality today is that Africa is a net importer of food and agricultural products, despite its vast potential. Domestic food production has increased only 2.7% a year, just barely above the population growth rate. Many African countries have the lowest agricultural GDP per capita in the world, reflecting slow productivity growth as a result of poor yields and low land use. To have Africa contribute to food security, appropriate lands need to be brought into production, and existing land needs to be brought to higher levels of production. Except for northern Africa, there is lots of land. Between 21 to 30% of the land area in sub-Saharan Africa is suited for rain-fed crop production. And although Africa has land that can be developed at a fairly low cost for agriculture, ownership of these lands lie primarily with the states. Land distribution poses a big challenge, creating conflicts for smallholders who are farming land, but they don't own it. Many governments have been unable to resolve their land issues, which has limited their ability to improve production and attract private sector investment. This is an important point because it is essential for farmers in Africa or any other part of the world to have clarity around their property rights. They must be able to own their land and pledge it as collateral if they're expected to reinvest and raise their productivity over time. Farmers also need to receive a price that encourages them to invest in their operations year after year. For Africa to feed itself and help feed the world, the issue of price adequacy is crucial. To see the potential, you just need to look at their current production. There's a huge productivity gap between Africa and the rest of the world. For example, between 1960 and 2008, world maize yields doubled from 2.5 to more than 5 tons per hectare, while Africa's yields stayed at less than 2 tons per hectare. So why is the productivity in Africa so low? Primarily, it's limited access to essential inputs and equipment and a slow transfer and adoption of technology. Other factors that impact production include the lack of infrastructure, roads, ill-equipped harbors, and then the lack of storage facilities. The continent has also been marked by conflict and a lack of market institutions such as commodity exchanges that promote the movement of product through free trade. While the challenges of Africa seem daunting, there's more momentum today than ever before to tackle these issues. Last year, in May of 2012, Cargill was among almost 30 multinational companies announcing its support for the G8 New Alliance for Food and Nutrition Security and the Grow Africa Partnership. David Nabarro mentioned these this morning in his remarks. We believe these efforts will facilitate critical policy discussions and commitments to accelerate investment and transformative change in African agriculture. Grow Africa exists to accelerate investments into African agriculture. It connects governments, businesses, investors, farmers, and development partners in order to advance agricultural partnerships. Cargill is currently pursuing a partnership to support smallholder farmers and improve domestic grain production in Mozambique. This project is in its formative stages. But we're anxious to explore a different approach to helping Africa. In years past, Cargill and others have answered the humanitarian call to provide food as part of broader relief efforts. Our goal here is to see if we can help develop a sustainable market for food grown on the continent, working with governments and non-governmental organizations to develop the appropriate public-private partnerships to make this happen. Beyond Africa, Cargill is using its leadership in food and agriculture to tackle the complex challenge of feeding the world. The basic infrastructure of the global supply chain is essential and is core to our business. We advocate for policies that increase overall food security and support agricultural development through the promotion of trust-based open trade and the promotion of efficient local markets. Cargill contributes to that trading system with our investments in logistics and storage facilities to move food from areas of excess to areas of need. Today, the world eats cheaper because we have a water-based export facility in Santarém, Brazil. We are working on the ground to increase agricultural productivity and incomes. Our ability to feed the world depends on the success of farmers at every level of production, from commercial scale to smallholders. Each year we work directly with millions of these farmers to help them raise more food, reach more markets, receive fair pricing, and improve their standards of living. And we can see this clearly in the work that we have done in our cocoa supply chain, where Cargill's on-the-ground training programs have helped smallholder farmers in the Ivory Coast, Ghana, Cameroon, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Brazil, improving their farming practices, increasing their yields, and raising their incomes. But what makes these productivity-enhancing programs work is having a reliable market for the crops and partners with which to trade. So the challenge of food security can seem daunting, but working together we can make this challenge. The imperative is to get global policy right. If the economics are right, the world will have more to eat. And we believe that companies like Cargill that are directly or indirectly in the food business have a responsibility to promote this trust-based free trade. Secondly, we need to be willing to have a frank discussion about food and fuel. And I believe we can have an appropriately sized biofuel industry and also extinguish hunger. We have to have the political will to get it done. And finally, it's imperative that we find a way to unlock the potential of African agriculture. Africa can contribute to food security if we can get farmers property rights and the right price to increase production. We can find a way to help Africa leverage the comparative advantage it's been given in terms of rainfall, soil type, and climate. So, can we feed the world? At Cargill, we believe by acting on our vision to be the global leader in nourishing people, advocating for policies that let markets work and enable farmers to thrive, expanding access to food through the development and implementation of public-private partnerships, and increasing agricultural productivity and incomes, the answer is yes, we can. Thank you. So I'd be happy to take some questions. Yes?
Can you go to the mic, please?
Oh, there they are.
Very inspiring speech, considering my father was a Fulbright scholar at the University of Wisconsin, and his first job was working for Cargill and coming back to Guyana in South America, which is, is part of the Amazon basin. You talked about security, food security. Perhaps you may want to educate the audience what the rich Arab Gulf states are doing in terms of buying up land in Latin America and in Africa.
Well, I think there's, quite a bit of purchasing of land going on, and we're certainly not an advocate of buying land up for those purposes. I mean, we believe in developing the local economy, the local farmers, and growing that way. We own very few farms ourselves. We do own a few poultry farms in China as we're developing that business from a biosecurity standpoint, but by and large, our belief is that we need to work with the local shareholders, the local landowners, and develop the economy that way. And we've got numerous examples where we've done that around the world.
My name is Mark Tanner. I teach economics at Kennesaw State University. And you shared with us the blessings of free trade, but you spared us the curse of subsidies. Why is that?
Well, I mean, you're not going to get a subsidy argument from Cargill. We do believe in free trade, and we believe if we have free open markets, then you're going to have products produced where they should be produced. And then as long as we've got the ability to trade, we're going to be in a much better position than if we try to become self-sufficient through subsidies or through protective barriers. And there's just so many examples of that around the world where government intervention in that case does not work.
Hi, my name is Damaso. As biofuel production increases, market supply for grain decreases, and the cost of grain in the market goes up. That's a basic economic. And how do you create a balance? One, considering the fact that the producers have more value with biofuel than selling the product raw on its own. And my last remark is the production of agriculture in many countries in Africa. For instance, I won't mention the name of this company, but in Kenya, in northern Kenya, this company went in and bought a lot of lands, actually expropriated a lot of lands. And with the promise of helping out the local community and reaching out to them. But what happened, it all turned out to be the other way around. They deviate the rivers, the local communities' properties end up flooding, and they lose everything. They have no way to claim because of corruption. So how do you really put a real channel between what's on the paper, which always looks very beautiful, versus what's the reality on the ground?
Two very good questions. The first question, I'll first say I'm not an economist. I'm a food microbiologist, but I'll give this one a shot because to me it's a pretty straightforward answer. Biofuel policy should be based on market conditions. So if the market demands biofuels, and biofuels are an economic alternative to fossil fuels, then you'll see that business grow. Right now, we're putting biofuels into gasoline because of government mandates, not because the market's demanding it. So that's the answer, number one. Let the market decide where those grains go. The second piece is, I think, a problem that everyone faces around the world. And that's why it's so important to have these public-private partnerships in place so that you have appropriate governance of these kinds of projects, so the conditions that you described don't happen, so that people know and they go in with their eyes wide open, fully transparent on how they're going to be doing the development work. And it's done in conjunction with local government as well as national government and the private sector. So you have to have all the stakeholders involved. And if you don't, I think that's when you run into trouble.
Thank Ginger Floyd Morehouse. Thank you for using the How Big is Africa map. So it opens so many people's eyes. We really don't understand the vastness of this continent. But what I have a question on your Food Must Move graphic.
Yes.
All of the arrows to Africa go in, as you mentioned. Is Cargill doing anything to get little arrows between countries inside this map?
We are. Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. You know, I think one of the interesting things about Cargill is that although we're this giant international agribusiness company, we're really a collection of local businesses. And anybody that's seen our operations down in Central America, for example, in Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, I mean, that's a local business. We operate locally down there. And our 98% of what I produce in China stays in China. I've got, you know, almost 60 facilities in China, but it's all for the Chinese market. So we're very much a global to local kind of company. So our intention would be, obviously, you know, to look at where we could move into Africa so that Africa can feed itself, and then hopefully they become, given their potential, a net exporter. Yes.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Kelly, and I've been teaching for the University of Georgia Terry College of Business. And my past has also been in corporate. I used to work for Monsanto myself. I know that Monsanto is very big on business plans. I want to find out if you're looking at a business plan country by country and strategically planning what exactly you're going to be doing per country, per the culture, and also having some end dates as to when you will end world hunger, I think country by country. I think the dates are crucial.
I don't know about the second question there, but I don't know if we've got that goal quite set yet. But
this group gets really tough.
Yeah, I can tell. It's a rough crowd. I thought everybody would be kind of quiet after lunch, you know, but I guess I was wrong. No, but we do local business planning. So we're actually in the process of kind of revamping the way that we're organized. We've just taken all of our food businesses down in Argentina, for example, which were under 2 or 3 different business units, consolidated them into a single Foods Argentina business. We have a Foods Brazil business. Our Central American businesses are conglomerated into businesses. So yes, we very much focus in on the local economy, the local conditions, and the culture. You will not find a lot of expats in our businesses overseas very long. We'll send some over there to get things started, but then our goal is to really staff up with local people who know the market and who know the government, and they can operate most effectively. So yes, our business plans are definitely locally generated.
Hi, my name is Claudius. I'm originally from Ethiopia. I'm wondering what a company like yours has done to engage the African diaspora because of their capacities.
I'm sorry, the African
diaspora.
Oh.
Because I know they have the capacity. Because most
yes, I know. I understand. I understand. I would say that, you know, our efforts in Africa are fairly early in making right now. We're most developed in Ghana and the Ivory Coast with our cocoa businesses. And as we're looking at where we expand, you know, it's just going to be a series of getting with the right people and with the right partners in order to figure out where we end up going.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can find them here.
Yeah, well,
most Africans who used to be in business
I'd be happy to talk with anybody who wants to come up and talk with me at the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Cedric Sussman with the World Affairs Council, and thank you for your great presentation. Without being too controversial, I know the issue of genetically modified foods is becoming increasingly to the forefront in a lot of people's minds. What role do they play in increasing yields and in helping you achieve your goal? And on the other side, what problems are they presenting to you as a company that produces food and distributes?
That's a very, very good question, because, I mean, we're a science-based, technology-based company. And so we're going to look at what technology can offer us in terms of improving the way that we produce food, whether it's through increased yields or whether it's through improved nutritional content of those foods. So for me, genetically modified is an important technology plank that we need to utilize responsibly. And by saying that, I mean we need to be transparent. We need to have appropriate government oversight to assure the safety of these events and that they're being used in a responsible way. But I believe that they are going to be critical to our success in driving better yields, different varieties that are adapted to different environments, and then also increasing the nutritional content of what we produce today.
Thanks. My name is Alex Alexandridis. I'm a professor emeritus at Georgia State University. I have to tell you that I first tasted chocolate in a care package after World War II when we were starving and American aid came. And we love companies like you. You're the largest grain-producing company in the world. But in my service at the UN, I was always painfully surprised to see that in conferences like the International Commodity Agreements, when prices were determined on which developing countries were either starving or making a living, our representation was totally commercial. It was the confectionery companies or the grain companies that represented the United States government. And I want to ask you, what is the conflict? I know your interests are in your stockholders, the non-profits is to the world. Why can we not feed the hungry people of the world when our food is rotting in our warehouses? I can understand the problems of logistics and warehousing and all that, But there is something more than that that doesn't make that thing possible. What are the conflicts between a commercial company that is looking after the stockholders and hunger in the world? Thank you.
Well, I think that's a very good question. And I think, I'll tell you this. We participate in food aid. We participated in food aid historically. But we're also participating in economic development in those parts of the world where people don't have enough to eat. And I think the long-term answer, is to work in those areas to create a market where they can produce food or they can produce crops that then can be sold to generate income so that they can freely trade with the rest of the world. Again, I get back to this concept of comparative advantage. And, certainly there are parts of the world that, you can take Saudi Arabia, for example, where they're producing oil, they're generating a lot of money, so then they can buy food in from around the world. The Japanese have, by and large, done that through some of their exports. They pay for their ability to buy food around the world. And I think you're seeing transformations occur in other parts of the world where that's happening. Moving people away from subsistence farming to where they're producing cash crops so that then they can buy a variety of foods from around the world, I think is a long-term answer. Having said that, when there are emergencies and there are people starving, we have acted as fast as we can through the systems that exist to get grain. We've donated 20 million metric tons of rice last year to the Sudan. And, as issues like that arise, we're going to be working very closely with the World Food Program, with CARE, and other partners to make sure that, people get the emergency aid that they need.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm a physician at Emory. We have medical missions, where doctors go. And is it possible, and I don't know what's in place right now, for people to volunteer and go and actually help grow those products with those people in those countries? They might have gardens in their front yard and spend a whole lot of time doing that, but they might get a lot more satisfaction in just donating their time and mixing with you all in some way where they were helping that way.
I am sure that we can find a place for people who want to volunteer to go overseas and work in some of the projects that we have in place. If you're interested, please give me your card and I'll get it to the right folks and they'll get in touch with you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Two more, okay, right here.
Hello, my name's Rebecca Fielding Miller. I'm a doctoral student at Emory University, and I also spend a lot of time working in Swaziland in South Africa, as a Peace Corps volunteer in South Africa. And I want to ask you about your approach to Africa. You talk about developing Ghana and about sort of the vast untapped resources in terms of agriculture in the country, but I just have small concern about the tone of that, and I want to ask you to put aside my concerns because it's not empty space. People live there. So what is Cargill doing to make sure that these smaller, rural, already marginalized communities aren't further pushed aside and further marginalized and further driven into poverty if this land is used for agriculture?
Right. That's a very good question, and we have a lot of experience with that in other parts of the world where by actually creating opportunities for people to come and move off a subsistence farm and begin working and earning incomes and moving into the middle class. It's about economic development. It's about economic opportunity. Doing what they do today, there's no chance that they're going to do anything differently than the previous generation. But by development, you give people opportunities then to become part of a wage-earning economic development program. And we've seen this happen. I mean, I can go through Central America, I can go through South America, in Southeast Asia, where this model works for people. Yes, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, I think the other point that Michelle's bringing up here is that we do a lot of work with CARE and other organizations to develop and promote small shareholder farmers. women especially, that are giving them economic opportunities, giving them access to a marketplace that they wouldn't have otherwise. Part of the problem is when the crop comes in, that's when everybody's crop comes in, right? And if they have no way to store their grain or they have no way to sell it into another market, they're going to get hit with a depressed price. And so that cycle just continues. So trying to create opportunities to either store their grain and wait for the market price to come back up or to go into other markets really is what we're trying to do. Yes, sir.
William Mansfield, Sustain Atlanta. I wanted to call upon you to ask you a simple question. As Cargill being the largest company, privately held company in the world, what efforts domestically here in the United States is Cargill made a commitment to from a corporate responsibility standpoint as relates to urban deserts in intercity communities throughout the United States? And with the vast resources that your firm has, along with other organizations such as yours, I am asking you from the standpoint of the 21st century challenge of humanity in America, what are we doing collectively together as a company, or is your company doing today in regards to this challenge of healthy, responsible foods or healthy foods as relates to inner city communities that don't have resources and access to the food in which you guys have pretty much been able to distribute around the world? And what efforts are you willing to personally take to see that these things are changed in the 21st century?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, we have a partnership with Feeding America, which is one of our major partners. And so we're big contributors to them around not only getting products into the food bank, we also worked with them to put together their food safety program to assure the integrity of the products that go into those food banks that are available for people in these urban deserts. We've also worked with our retail customers and promote and help them as they're looking at new distribution systems to get products into the inner city marketplaces. It's difficult for us because we're not a retailer, but we do work with the retailers and try and help them in getting a variety of products that will meet the demands of those local markets.
Well, okay. Let me say first a very challenging presentation, as you heard from that. It's a daunting subject. We will be in this next panel also addressing this. This is all off script, Steve. Don't get nervous. The real issues are about the tensions, and we've got to grapple with the tensions.
Yep, absolutely.
Whether it's Cargill's a big company, or Jeff Johnson's Birdsong Peanuts, or any of us, and you're going to hear that discussed. It's not only the successes, but the challenges that some come out of the tension themselves.
That's right.
And that's okay.
Yep. It's called creative tension.
Right. So we need to do that and remember these broader subjects and keep asking those tough questions. As I told you, this group gets really good after lunch. It's not like any group I've ever been a part of, so hang in there.
Good.
But let's thank Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.